Go back here. Let me hit this. Okay. All right. We are the what? Sure.
So this backyard, for example, right?
Uh-huh.
It's not called knowing the backyard.
Knowing. Normally, when we say knowing, it is something that you can.
When you know something like the back of your hand, it's not knowing anymore.
Not right.
It's not.
It's not because it's not an add-on. In other words, like this. When you say I know it like the back of my hand means like this. Means even though I don't really know it. I don't know how many pieces there are in it, but I know it so thoroughly that if I think about it, I'll be able to identify every part of it. You understand what I'm saying? There's there is two quite distinct concepts of knowing. When you say I learned this and I know it.
Of course, no, no. That's of course. I understand. It's very different
So
from.
then this knowledge is an add-on to the person.
Yeah.
When there is a knowledge at a higher level than having learned it, which means this is an intrinsic knowledge, a personal experience. Personal experience is also knowledge, but it's not knowledge in the sense that I've learned about it. I've experienced it. And therefore, if I've experienced it, if you ask me a question, I'll be able to answer because I will be able to find the answer within my experience, not because I know the answer to your question.
But that's what in Yiddishkeit, it's not an intellectual knowledge, it's a das. It's a das, which that's what we call the das.
Right.
What connects to your emotions. You don't know it in your head, you know it
No,
like
no.
das. Why isn't it called
No, no. That, this is, in Das, this is where it pertains, and you do know it. You do know it at the emotional level, at practical level. I'm talking about, not at, you don't draw from it any practical. Does it make a difference what the backyard looks like, practically speaking? You know what I'm saying? Or the back of your hand? This is, this is not knowledge to the point where you're actually drawing some conclusions on that basis. In order to draw a conclusion, you really have to identify it and know it.
but this is without
Knowing
eyes.
by osmosis. What does it mean? I'll find it. I know it. Even if I never was there, I know it. You know what?
This can only, what you said a second ago, is also can be, when it's something that starts off externally, where it starts off as an add-on, but through getting to the depth of it, then
Oh,
you also reach the level.
that's right. Well, that's the point.
Not
Right.
that you should just have like these life experience feelings and.
No, no, no. It means that you go through knowledge and to clear knowledge until you dig into it and becomes part of your base.
You can even say that until you realize that it is part of the thing, because everything is.
That's right.
It does not become. You just figure it out.
That's right. That's right. It doesn't become. You find it.
You find it.
So you mean when you say you got them in such a time,
Mm-hmm.
you work and you find out you already knew it.
That's right. I have a whole talk on this, on the archives, precisely this Nakuda and this Nakuda I'm explaining there. At Motzosu, what do you find? You find that which was contained in your nefesh, which is infinitely greater than all that you've learned.
So what's the difference? What's the difference if once I found it, I already knew it from before? So what's the practical?
There are many things that can be said on that. The important thing of it, and the Kuda, is that this is where you relate to the truth. It's one thing to know about the truth. That's one level. Another way is to know the truth, and another is to actually relate to the truth. This is where your life becomes real. That's what I said. You bring out life. ultimately, like it says in Tanya, that Mashiach will come and Nigel Kved Hashem and Yilkus will be revealed. What will be? That all the mitzvahs will be so obvious that, oh, this is the right thing to do. Not only the right thing to do, but this is the only thing to do. It's the only truth. Be no struggle. Because we'll understand the Holocaust. We'll see the world from a perspective, a more godly perspective. There is the famous episode where the Alter Rebbe, when they came to arrest the Alter Rebbe, and they came in, the Alter Rebbe was at the time in the middle of davening. They had his tefillin on. And they came into his room, and they saw him davening. So he was then being arrested as a Moired Malchus, as a rebel, who was sending money to create an invading army to come and invade Russia. I mean, you know some of the story. So he was mamash a Moired Malchus, a real criminal, from their perspective. When they saw him, they backed out, and they waited outside until he finished davening. And they were almost like, they were scared to approach him. Out of fear, they backed away. So the Alter Rebbe later said that this is what it says, and the Gemara says, you have to translate anything. So someone asked the Alter Rebbe, so how come they don't get scared from my tefillin? So the Rebbe said, it doesn't say Eyot tefillin she'al horosh. Yeah. How come they don't get scared from my tefillin? The Rebbe said, it doesn't say Eyot tefillin she'al horosh. It says Eyot tefillin she'birosh.
So why did they take him when he took it off?
What?
It wasn't good in him when he took it off.
No, when the tefillin were on him, they were bepnimius on him. They belonged there. They were not just on him, on his head. They were on him and connected to the brain, connected to the whole network. But they were really on him, which means that they were actually connected to the pnimius. So they had to back off. Okay. So we are on Daf Yud, a few lines, about 5 lines above the middle of this paragraph, of the paragraph that begins on that page. The line begins with the word "Komoshal Hamelech Shmachtiri Moise Bekeser Hamalchus."
We have another sefer, by the way, another map.
No, I took the one from there. There are 2 there. Oh, great. Okay. So we explained we started is in the senior that the same as we said before regarding dibur, that when it comes down to dibur, which is the lowest level of the seichel, this is when you actually relate to the deepest aspects of the seichel. And then we say that the same thing is in the inyan of hashpah, okay. The inyan of hashpah of birth, and we see the similar inyan, but of course there it is in Gashmi is much deeper. that the bracha for birth, which is beyond giving birth to a child, which is beyond the koyach of an individual, of a person. It's a special bracha that comes from Mila. And when did this bracha come? When there is a makabel. Zocher and Keva. When there is Ishu Ishu, there is a makabel from this hashpah. At the time of Kabbalah, this is when there is this deepest inyan that of this bracha. and then we go into the inyan of Melech. That in the time when a Melech is coronated, he gets a crown. Even though Malchus is like the lowest inyan by the Melech. And yet that's the time when he gets a crown. And when is this? It's simply because Malchus is like Dibur, like the external, like expressing to the outside. Well, good. And he brings down that the Torah sheyitro that when is the Torah given to the Melech? B'yem chasonosei. What is it? B'yem chasonosei. As we're going to see, in the Pashtos, B'yem chasonosei means at the time when the Melech becomes Melech in fact. Because a Melech, before he becomes Melech, before he's coronated, he has to have the potential to be a Melech. And yet, with all the potential, he doesn't have a crown. He doesn't have that madriga called a crown, which we discussed last time. But when he's coronated, that's when he gets the crown. Now we're going to discuss the scene. That's when he gets all the greatness. Okay, Inyan ha'achtorah beruchnius. Okay, we have it. The Inyan of hachtorah. Hachtorah means that we're coronating the king. Beruchnius. What does this mean in ruchnius? He shema oirerim. Okay, what is the question beruchnius? Hachtorah begashmius means that the people accept the Melech as a king and they put a crown on him and they declare him as king. But what actually transpires, what actually happens during this period of hachtorah? Something happens to the king. He becomes king. There's a profound change in the Melech himself. What happens in the Ruchnisdike world? He shema oirerim o mamshichim rotzoin limeluch. At the moment of hachtorah, it means that we actually draw and we arouse in the Melech the rotzoin for kingdom, the rotzim for reign, to be a king. What does this mean? Since that the koyach of melucha that is inherent and contained in the nefesh, hu ne'elam ma'oid, is very deeply concealed. She'einoi bebchinas gilui klal, which means that it is not in a state of gilui, in a state of revelation, in recognition at all. There is no, in the king, there is no recognition at all that he has any kind of a rotzin to rule, to be a melech. V'tzorich le'oirev, and thus we have to awaken, arouse, u'lahamshich rotzin limelucha begilui, to draw a rotzin, that he should want to be a melech begilui. V'sheyirtze liyes melech, that he should consent and want to be melech. V'zehu inyan ha'hachtorah. This is the inyan of hachtorah. Okay, so let us discuss this a little bit. We have to understand, we have to reflect. First of all, before we go, we have to kind of eliminates the prejudices that we have in terms of Melech. Because Melech, as we know it, the Melech that came down to us through history books, Melochim, who were not Melochim, they were tyrants. They were rulers by force, against the will of the people. This is not called Melech. In Chassidus, in Torah, this is called a Sar, a ruler. He took the rulership, he took the reins of the kingdom by force, and he rules. He put his people, his officers all over the place, and they forced the issue. That's not a melech. A melech, in a true sense, means a person who is taken, who is requested, who is begged by the people to become their melech, to become their king. Why are they begging him to be their king? What do they need a king for? They know that the king is going to be ruling and they're going to be subservient to him. The union that they want a king has the following background. There is a people. There are people. A whole bunch of people. And these people, each of them lives their own lives, private lives, and pursues their own interests. But they are lacking a sense of national purpose. What does it mean to be a member of this, to be a Yid? There has to be a significance to it. What is the king? The king that they coronate. He is the one who will be representative of the nation, of the national heart, the national pulse. And he will set a purpose, he will set what is called a moral level for this nation. The king has the capacity to elevate the entire people to a level that they could never reach on their own. Because the king is above, and by their relating to the king, he elevates them to his level, essentially. So, basic thing that we want to understand before we go into this is that the union of the Melech is that he becomes part of this nation. And by virtue of him becoming part of this nation and the head of this nation, he actually gives this nation a different perspective and a different sense of value and a different sense of purpose. To illustrate this, how this reflects itself practically, again, we have to kind of allow ourselves to understand it beyond the limited view that we have in today's narrow world. One of the things that the king does, it says that one of his inyanim is to wage war. War. The king used to do war. David HaMelech waged a lot of wars. David HaMelech is like a model king, right? And he waged a lot of wars. When David HaMelech wanted to build the Beis Hamikdash, Hashem said to him through a Novi that it's very appropriate that you should build the Beis Hamikdash, but you're not going to be the one to build the Beis Hamikdash. Your son is going to build it. Why? Because you wage a lot of wars, on L'Shem Shamayim, but still you waged wars. The Dam Rav Shofachta, you spilled a lot of blood. And you cannot be the one to build the Beis HaMikdash. So on the one hand, it was David's privilege to build the Beis HaMikdash, and it's his chus. And the Beis HaMikdash is called on his name, because he prepared everything in the Beis HaMikdash. He is the one who deserved the privilege to build the Beis HaMikdash. But nevertheless, he couldn't do it because he waged war. Which means that the wars were not contrary to Beis HaMikdash. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the chus to build it. But it had to go through his son. So the wars that David HaMelech waged were wars entirely l'shem shamayim. What does it mean? You wage war l'shem shamayim. You're killing people. What kind of where is there, so to speak, a redeeming factor in this? And the Rambam describes the Melech. He says one of the things in Melech is lilchem milchamis. What is the inyan of a milchama? Again, we're talking in an ideal situation. The inyan of milchama is justified and has a place when there is, just like when you go to milchama, right? All the soldiers that go with you, they're going to kill, but they also get killed. So how does a melech take his people into war and exposing them to danger? What then does it mean? It means that this exposure to danger is justified. Because this is something where they're going to be accomplishing with this war, something greater than they can accomplish in life. In terms of the ultimate purpose of this nation. So that war represents, again I said in an ideal situation, war represents a putting ourselves in mesiras nefesh for the ideals and for the purposes of this nation. Let's take an example. In our day, there were, during the Second World War, which was an atrocious war, against an enemy that was subhuman. Everybody understood that. There were two countries who were Obama's neighbors. They were the British and they were the French. The French, they saw that they cannot fight, and to fight the Germans would require a lot of sacrifice. So they just made peace with them. Made peace with them. They saved their lives, but they gave up all their ideals. The Germans took over their land, they ruled them. They lived with it. The British, they said no way. No way. We're going to fight it till the end. Because we're not going to give up our principles. Even though, yes, we are going to die for it. But dying for our principles is greater than living without principles. Without our principles. This is something which we experience in our own days. Which means that waging war, especially a kosher king who goes to war, waging war means that he is drawing his people to an ideal, to an action that is greater than life itself. This shows that the inyan of the king is to elevate his people beyond their experience of living. This is the Pshat HaMelech. This is why the people want the king. The king on his part, he is involved prior to becoming a melech. What is he involved in? He's involved in his own intellectual and emotional pursuits. To be a melech over the people and to be involved in ruling a country and to elevate others, for that he has to step away from his own concentration, his own involvement, but he's involved in his own thoughts and pursuits. And he has to start talking to the people. Talking to the people and explaining to the people ideals that he has and presenting it to them is something which he never felt he's not interested. Because this lowers him. It takes away from his own personal pursuits. Personal pursuits not for selfish reasons, real intellectual pursuits. So, but the people come to him and they say to him, we've identified you as one who is suited to be our melech. And we want you to take on the melech. What does that mean? It means by the melech that he has to forget about his own pursuit and now relate to the people. This relating to the people is called the Midas HaMalchus. What is Midas HaMalchus? In our Moshe, what we learned in the previous Maimer, Machshava with Dibur, this is the identical union. When one is involved in a thought, in a deep thought, and he's totally involved, he enjoys it immensely because he's involved in very deep reflection. And he doesn't want to get away from it. Then someone comes to him and says, explain to me this. But, he doesn't feel like turning himself away from his own involvement. And then start to explain it to someone who does not know it. So you have to start formulating his thoughts at a much lower level. He doesn't feel like doing it. Except, when will he agree to do it? He will agree to do it when he sees that this person really, really wants to understand, really wants to know it. And then he recognizes, that's what we said before, he recognizes that by analyzing his thoughts and putting them into words, he himself will get to a deeper sense of it than he himself understood. And this is when we actually can sense and say, okay, I'll sit down with you. I'll examine it. I'll go through with it. Because this is really something that touches the essence of what he was doing. The same thing is in the Melech. The Melech is involved in his own madrigas. When the people come to him, he has to judge and say, are they capable of receiving this? But if he sees that they're capable of receiving it, he first wants to do it. Because then the truth of what he is, much deeper truth than what he recognized before, first now comes out. The same as Dibur and Machshava. Yeah, okay, because this Inyan of expressing it, that's Malchus. Malchus means to express it externally, is very concealed. Meaning, and like I said before, if a person is involved in a very deep thought, he is not interested in sharing it with anyone.
That's not Nello, that's he's not interested.
Why? Why is he not
He's
interested?
very concealed within himself, and he gets his own life, so for him to find that thing is not something, I think it's something he's not, there's no relationship with it.
Right. So let me explain to you what Nello means like this. Normally, we have Chochmah, Bina, V'das. It's a natural process that when one gets into Chochmah, has an idea, has a spark, it's natural that from this spark should come Bina. It's not the same Madrega at all. But it's natural that from Chochmah he will come to Bina. To illustrate this, it's one to that, like we discuss all the time, Chochmah is exemplified by sight. The Gashmis, sight is called like Chochmah. We discuss it many times. And hearing, putting what you see into words, is called Bina. When a person sees a marvelous sight, and he's very impressed with it, it's inevitable that the next step would be, he's not going to just say, oh, I'm impressed. He will want to find out, what am I looking at? What's actually happening here? Just the brightness and the beauty of it alone is not, yes, it's beautiful. Because it's beautiful, you want to know it. And put it into words and to himself. How is this all happening? Be very curious. You really want to understand what he sees. So Chochmah and Bina is called Ilav Yom. In other words, it comes automatic. I don't mean automatic without effort, but there is a desire, there's a rotzen from Chochmah to come into Bina. And this is the Seder Hishtalshos. From Chochmah into Bina, into Das, and then into Midas. It's also a natural Seder Hishtalshos. That when one understands a certain thing is good, the Midas come out. And it brings down into Midas and all that. Except when it comes to Malchus. Because Malchus is like the external. That doesn't happen naturally. He does not have a natural impulse to go and influence others, for instance. He wants to do himself the right thing.
People don't have a natural impulse to tell other people tradition they thought about, or
no, that's a different thing. That's on an intellectual level, because they want to an exchange. You want to hear what other people will say about it. It's a different thing. But in terms of influencing, that's coming out of himself. He's not interested. This in Malchus is concealed. He himself, within his own, and this is what it's called, the whole Seder Hishtalshus from Chochmah on through the Midas is what's called an internal Hishtalshus, all happening internally in the person. Malchus is where it becomes external, exposed. And there is no natural impulse to go to that level. Why is there not this natural impulse to go to that level? An interesting concept here. The reason the natural impulse to go to that level is because it says Malchus is Ner Lamoid. What that means is like this. All the koiches, Chochmah, Bina, V'das, and the Chesed, and all the Midas, they exist in the person, in the nefesh, in an actual state. They have to be revealed. They have to be activated. But they actually exist there, even before they're activated. Malchus does not exist in a factual presence in the person. No one thinks of himself as a melech until he becomes a melech, unless he's sick. Nobody thinks of himself as a melech. Melech is something which gets created by the request of the people. The union of being a melech is not in the. Huh?
Can you compare this to, like we said about the will of the body, the soul to descend into the body?
Yes.
The soul never would want to descend.
That's exactly it.
Body.
That's right.
No,
That's right. There's no. There isn't that union. to think of oneself as a teacher, to think of oneself as an Isha Chesed, as giving tzedakah, even before you have the ability to do it. You can think of that. You can project, because you have that need, you have that desire. But to be a melech, a normal person does not have that kind of desire.
I still understand, like, really what a king is then, because I thought a king isn't a king more like a king is an influencer in essence, right?
Yeah.
So what's like a teacher wants to influence? So why would a king not want to run a nation properly? He doesn't.
No, that's different. The teacher and the king, the influence of the teacher and the king are totally different. Yeah, okay, good. Totally different. A teacher influences by relating to the pupil's seichel. He reveals a seichel. He teaches him that which he can understand. A teacher will not, if a teacher will told, okay, teach a 5-year-old Ranat. Teach him Ranat. I don't want to. How can I teach him Ranat? He won't understand it. I want to teach someone who will understand what I'm teaching him. So it's a relation, seichel to seichel. A melech, his influence is not to the people's seichel. A melech, his influence is not, you should understand what I tell you. No. Because they will never understand the melech. The mind of the king is superior to their understanding. That's why they made him to a melech. They didn't make him into a Rosh Hashiva or a Rosh. Do you know that the halacha, the highest position in the Jewish people is a melech, higher than Kohen Gadol, higher than the Nasi, higher than the Rosh Sanhedrin, higher than the greatest Rosh Hashiva. Why? These are scholars. The Kohen Gadol is a holy man, goes into Kodesh Kodoshim. Because all of these, they relate to some quality in the person. The seichel, the midas. The melech is totally different. The melech relates to the entire person. That's why the melech, his way of relating to people is by issuing a decree, not by issuing an explanation. Because in fact, the only way that he can elevate these people is by this decree, because they will not understand the depth of his thought.
The Rosh Sanhedrin don't understand what the Melech is thinking?
One? Right.
Why not? Like, the Melech is much smarter than the Rosh Sanhedrin.
It's not just smaller, it's depth. The smarts could be, they can understand convoluted and complicated thought. That's not the meaning of the melech. Like I point out, during the time when I explained what seichel is. Seichel is not a question of being smarter. If a human being is smarter than a cat, no, it's not smarter. It's a different category. Different category. That's what the melech is. It's a categorical difference.
He has it from before he's a king also?
Yes. Yes, of course. That's why they chose him to be a king. Because he's a superior person. That's why he becomes king. Well, as we go and learn, I'll bring more illustrations and all that. But that's the principle of king. And this is why we say that Malchus is very deeply concealed. That's when deeply concealed. It's there in the nefesh, but it's not there on the begilud and begolud, as an existing koyach. Where do we see that it's not there begilud and as existing koyach? Because we see that there is no natural progression from seichel into midas into malchus.
A king does not have the natural desire to see the country in for example, the Rebbe doesn't have the vision of seeing the whole world in a pure state.
Of course it does. The Before he was a Rebbe, he was totally, totally, totally disinterested in being Rebbe.
But why? I don't understand why. Because he wants to see the whole world in the Chabad and where it is today.
No, no, I'm sure he wants to, but he didn't see that this is his thing. He couldn't relate to it. The Rebbe said, me? Oh, where do I come to? I'm not interested.
But he doesn't sense his abilities?
That's why I'm explaining to you that the meaning for Malchus is not just abilities. Malchus means to be able to rise above and to hover above the people and to give directives, not just explain. The Rebbe sat by Farbrengens, before he was Rebbe, Farbrenged hours and hours and hours. That's not what Rebbe is. And that quality, that Indian is completely concealed, very deeply concealed, as you said over here. I want to call your attention to the words here, so you see how the Rebbe, sheyesh ben shekoyach hamelucha sheyesh ben nefesh. You see the words I'm saying. Shekoyach hamelucha sheyesh ben nefesh, because the koyach hamelucha that exists in the nefesh, hu ne'elam mo'od, is very deeply concealed, which means it. What does it mean? She'eina mo'od? Not that something conceals it. It means she'einoi bebechinas gilui klal. It is not in a state of gili at all. What does that mean? It's not in functioning koyach. It's not on the level of on a functioning level at all. It's there in the nefesh, because the nefesh is complete, so he has that capability. Did you see the words I'm pointing to? Sheina bechinas gili klal means it's not in a state in a gili. Seichel. Before a person learns anything, does he have seichel? He has seichel. Now you can take the seichel and use it. Surely after you use it, it becomes more begili. But there is a state of gili in the seichel before he even uses it.
So how did the fool get the king to be a king? You said it first.
Oh, that no. I said before, but that was only introduction. He's going to describe it directly now. Okay. Yeah.
So why then, for example, did you have in history people that they didn't end up being tyrants?
They didn't.
They were not tyrants. They weren't. They were, but they became king based on their own motivation. You have people that, like for example, like Alexander or other people like this. They had before they were prompted. They had like a will to be like to rule the world.
That's right. And they were rulers not by consent. Not by consent, and they didn't elevate. They ruled the way they wanted, in their own way. They were tyrants.
So any kingship that's a result of somebody's initiative to rule the world, it's not an Indian of Mulucha.
Not in Mulucha.
And so my second question is that since it's like even though it's Nel Moed, but it's inherent in every soul,
yeah.
And it's also inherent in the nation that there should be a Melech for the reason that you said. So why are there no Malachim today? Why don't we find that there's you'd think that since it's such an inherent thing that every country would have a Melech and it'd be like it was 1,000 years ago, or why is it completely lacking except for the Rebbe and I don't know if there's any other.
Because what's called nismatu hadoiris, because people fell down to such a low level. Both the people do not realize that they need to be elevated. What is the current attitude? Current attitude is in the world, I don't need to be elevated. I do what I like. If I crawl on the ground and I eat dust, so that's my preference. Don't interfere with me. If I like some perversion, that's my preference. The whole Indian that there is something to be sought, some value to life that to be sought, has been lost. And the reason it has been lost because whatever the confusion in what life stands for and so forth. But the Pearl Mamash, people don't think along those lines. They don't want anybody to pull them out of their dirt. They prefer it there and don't interfere with me.
Just shows it's just a little level of humanity.
Yeah, I mean, for whatever reason, I mean, ultimately this will bring to a higher level, but the Pei Mamash, this is the transitional period where it's not possible. Not possible at all.
And even I mean until the Baal Shem Tov and then the students of the Maggid, even amongst the Yidden, it wasn't. I mean, that is essentially the idea of a malach.
Yes. Well, the thing is that before by Eden, in general speaking, the Rov in the town, on a very limited scale, in his town was like a melech. Huh?
All right.
It was like a melech. My father Hashem told me that in their town, where he lived, small town, and there were very few Eden in those days who didn't keep Shabbos or kashrus, it was, but not everyone was that excited about it and that involved. It was that's condition, you couldn't do any other way. So there was, I remember that there was this store that kept open. I think it was a barber shop, and in a barber shop you can do things which are neged halacha, like giving razor shaves and all that. But when the Rav came by, he would not do it. He was afraid of the Rav.
The barbershop can.
You could. I mean, in the barber shop there is things that are done sometimes. Shleike halacha. So my father remembered that there was this barber shop, and he was shayach. He was capable of doing this kind of thing and giving razor shaves to a yidden, which is also mamish awesome. And he was open Friday afternoon, not Liebenchen time and not Shkia time, but Friday afternoon, and the time when the Rav was going to shul. The Rav passed by the store, and he saw that the store was open. He went in and told him, close it right away, and he closed it. The Rav in Bayidin was like a melech, in a minimal, in Zeir Anpin. And the Gemara says, Man Malki Rabbon. The Rabbon are like Mlochim. Because a Rav Paskin Hashayle, in certain instances, he doesn't have to explain himself. If a Paskin Hashayle pertains to a rabbi, he has to explain where he gets it from, but it tells you, he can Paskin Hashayle without explaining. I'm sorry?
Why would you even think that he needs to explain himself?
No, if
He tells you he knows much better or than you do, and he tells you he's an expert in why
that's right. If you trust the Rav, he doesn't have to explain to you. But I'm talking about this barbershop guy who gave his shaves, also big shaves. He would say, "Oh, I don't want to listen. Show me in Shulchan Aruch that I have to listen to you." You understand? The Rav says, "I'm not showing you. Just close it." Understand?
So what's the spiritual reason why a person would get affected by Malach in such a situation? This is obviously different than a human, like a regular Alexander type of king. He's not a tyrant.
No, of course not.
So what's this person doesn't accept the king. Someone's no Shama Shama doesn't necessarily accept the Rav to be his Rav.
Yeah. Because a person, like I said, today's day and age, the idea of freedom has been interpreted to such extreme levels, where we consider freedom that I do my thing and I don't associate with anyone. I don't belong to any group. Like if we tell somebody, you have to belong to the Jewish people. Says, no, I'm an individual. Whatever the reason, I said I'm not going one way or the other. Eventually, Mitzvah, this is all going to end up for the best. But the Pei Mamish, we're going through a very difficult period. But if you ask what would be the reason would be that a person is conscious, that he wants to to stay at some ruchnisdike level, meaningful ruchnisdike level. He wants his life to be meaningful, and there are certain levels that he cannot reach on his own. And by being associated with a Rav, with a Rebbe, he is able to sustain that level. And he appreciates it immensely.
One question. You say that you said the relationship of Dibur is like a relationship of Malchus.
Right. Dibur to Seichel is like Malchus, right? Mm-hmm.
But in a way it's different because Malchus, with the people, he truly transcends any power they have. It's like the way the Malchus of the people have no relationship to the Malchus. It's like, the reason he doesn't have to explain what he is in Korea is because it's something, the reason I don't want to explain it to somebody else is because I'm lost in my thought. Not because my speech is totally transcending him.
Right. Well, it is the very similar thing in a different context. We have discussed in the past and explained what is the meaning of oisios. That oisios is the pshat that you take a seichel and you put it into kelim, into such form that are really in themselves devoid of any ruchnius, of any meaning. Any meaning derived from these oisios is because the person who listens to you can draw from this, he puts the words together and he can draw it from this the seichel, because he himself has also seichel. But the oisios themselves don't carry seichel. They are so constructed, the oisios themselves are without any ruchnius. And this is where the big challenge is of putting it into words. So, to take a seichel and put it into words means to take the seichel and eliminate from it, like we learned in previous moment, completely any oir. You remember that concept? Any oir, any light, anything that is like any brightness, and put it and put it down to a skeleton. In other words, just the facts of the seichel. And this is what you can put into words. This, putting the seichel at the words level is similar to taking the king's thought and put it into a decree. What does a decree mean? The decree is the end results of the king's seichel. But in itself, it carries no seichel, it carries no oir. But it actually encompasses the whole seichel of the king. But it comes out in the form of a decree. Okay? And this is where the similarity is. That in order to put a seichel into words completely, you have to strip the seichel of any richness. Oh, I see it, I understand it. No, tell me that you understand it doesn't help me. You have to put it into words, which means you strip it completely. And then the Talmud listens to it, and he delves into it, and he can then reconstruct it in his own mind.
But this is only between a very, very high rabbi and a very good distance between the rabbi and the students.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Well, that's the whole idea, that he's taken his seichel and put it into words. Otherwise, it's an even keel, Tell me what's the weather outside. That's not, doesn't require much effort there. Of stripping it or anything, Well, it's 20 degrees. It's 20 degrees. Right? If you want to describe How it feels, it's a different thing. Understand? Okay. So let's get to... Okay, I'm going back in these words because I want to show you how carefully the Rebbe explains the singing. It's very much benelam and in bechinas gilui klal. It is not in a state of gilui. There is no actual functioning level of malchus or melucha in the king prior. And therefore we have to recreate that it should be a rotzen limelucha, that he should have a will, a desire for malchus. Now, a rotzen limelucha means rotzen limelucha comes before being king. Now he has a rotzen for the melucha. Sheyirtzen li is melech, that he should consent, he should want to be melech. Zehu inyan ha'achtor. This is the inyan ha'achtor. How is that with ha'achtor? This is when we coronate him, which means that we are revealing in him the rotzen limelucha.
Is it once he's already coronated, once he accepts to be king, that's when he's coronated?
Yeah, but he accepts the king at the time of coronation.
Right, but the will not necessarily is the final act. The will is just the beginning of the coronation. It's the will to be coronated. It's not the actual coronation.
There are perhaps two steps in this. One is that he will say, okay, I'll go for it. Like you say, this is a will to will. I'll accept coronation if you give it to me. But it still doesn't have the rotzen limlucha. Rotzen limlucha is a factual, functioning rotzen. That happens at the moment of coronation itself. And how is this accomplished? This is a very important Indian. Very briefly, v'hainu, and that is alidei ha'om, through the people. Shemekablim aleim oyam malchusei berotzain, because the people accept the yoke of his malchus berotzain willingly. This is what we say in davening. Malchusei berotzain kibul aleim. Malchus is only berotzain. When the people come and accept his malchus berotzain, and what does it mean they accept his malchus? Liyois betelim elov legamri, that they give over themselves over to him completely and say, we are bottled completely. We are non-entities. Because if they are entities, then that means the king will have to explain himself and dig with them and debate with them. There's no way he can't get involved in that. I can't undertake to try to explain to a cat what I think. So, this is expressed in the in bowing, the pishik yodrayim raglayim. Bowing, the real meaning of bowing is that you fall down on the floor, stretch and put out your hands and feet. What is the symbol of that? It symbolizes that I don't exist. I'm entirely under your command. Why is it necessary? Because that's the only way you can bring out the Hamluch. Why? Because that's the only way that the Melech can relate and say to you what he thinks. As I said before, because for the Melech to relate to the people through his seichel and through debate and through convincing them, he won't undertake. He's not interested.
Right, he's not interested, but what does that make him want to do regardless? That makes it the ability to do it.
That we'll see later. This is the similar thing that said Dibur brings out deeper koiches than Machshava. When he sees that, then he sees that, this will actually bring out the truth that I'm aware of even more greatly than I know it now.